Welcome to the Power Book of Podcasts. Unlock your potential with powerful book summaries that inspire personal growth and broaden your understanding of the world. Each week, we explore life-changing ideas, from leadership to mindset strategies to keys for happiness and success. Learn actionable insights to apply in your daily life. Join our growing community of thinkers and seekers. Like, comment, and hit that subscribe button now. It's time to supercharge your mind with the Power Book of Podcasts.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're diving deep today into a whole bunch of sources you sent us, all about lost civilizations and secret knowledge and ancient mysteries. You really seem fascinated by these places, artifacts, people that history has kind of left behind.
Yeah, it seems like you're drawn to the fringes of history and archaeology, the places where the stories are, well, they're challenged. You're definitely thirsty for knowledge. You want to go beyond the accepted narratives.
Definitely. And that's what we're here to do, to go through all this amazing material you've sent, separate fact from speculation, right? And find the most interesting, the most thought-provoking nuggets. Just for you.
We're your guides. We'll lead you through this whole labyrinth of enigmatic stories. We'll look at the evidence. We'll break down all the theories. And we really want you to think critically about all this.
Okay, so lost civilizations. I think it's to start with the legend of Atlantis. A story that's, it's captivated everyone for centuries.
Oh, Atlantis. Yeah, it's a captivating tale. It's that lost city that sparks wonder and that desire to uncover its secrets.
And our main source, right, is Plato. His dialogues, those, the Timaeus and Critias, they paint this picture of this advanced island civilization that was around supposedly thousands of years before his time.
Right. According to Plato, he learned about it from Egyptian priests. They described it as this powerful naval empire that was swallowed up by the waves because of its hubris. It's a cautionary tale in a way, a reminder that power fades and that unchecked ambition is dangerous.
But here's the thing. Every other ancient mention of Atlantis seems to come after Plato's writing. So was he, making up a story? Or could there be some truth to it?
That's the question, isn't it? We've had centuries of exploration and research, but no proof.
But people keep searching. The theories about its location are all over the place. The Azores, Antarctica, even the Caribbean. But one theory really got to me. Dr. Rainer Kuhn, he's using satellite pictures. And he thinks Atlantis is in southwestern Spain, near Cadiz. He even thinks he's found temples dedicated to Poseidon and Cleito, just like Plato described.
Interesting. It's a fascinating idea. But it's just one theory, of course. We need real evidence to back it up.
Okay, so the mystery of Atlantis is still out there. But let's move on to another lost city, also shrouded in myth and legend, Troy. And we have Homer's epic poem, The Iliad, to thank for that.
The Iliad, such a classic. Heroes, gods, epic battles. It tells the story of the siege of Troy by the Greeks, a war that started because Helen was abducted.
Helen of Troy, the face that launched 1,000 ships. But was there any historical truth to it? That's where Heinrich Schliemann comes in. This guy was obsessed with finding Troy. Obsessed. He was convinced Homer wasn't just making it up.
And he found it. Well, he found a city in Hisarlik in Turkey. Most people think it's ancient Troy. His excavations revealed different layers of the city from way back in the Bronze Age.
But Schliemann was, how do I put this, overly enthusiastic? Maybe. He was so desperate to find something. That proved the Iliad was true. He might have jumped to conclusions and even maybe destroyed some important stuff in the process.
You're right, but his findings, they led to more research into the Trojan War. And there are clues, little bits of evidence, that suggest Homer's story might have been based on something real.
Like what?
Well, we've got Hittite letters, and they mention a conflict in a place called Wilusa. And some scholars think that's Ilios, another name for Troy. These letters talk about tension between the Hittites and a people called the Ahiawa, and they might be the Achaeans, the Greeks from the Iliad.
It's like we're putting together this huge puzzle, taking bits from different cultures and times to try to get the whole picture. It makes you wonder how many other lost civilizations are out there, waiting for us to find them.
That's a great question. It's really intriguing to think about. And speaking of lost civilizations, why don't we cross the ocean? Let's go to the Americas, to the Maya. You sent us some amazing stuff on Chichen Itza, one of their most famous cities.
I'm all in. Chichen Itza always seemed so mysterious. What makes it stand out among the Mayan cities?
Chichen Itza is, it's special. A powerful city, a religious center in the Yucatan Peninsula. It flourished between the 7th and 13th centuries AD. Their architecture it's a mix of Mayan traditions with influences from other Mesoamerican cultures.
And it seems like the Temple of Kukulkan, that pyramid, is like the main attraction.
Totally. It shows off their architectural skills and their deep knowledge of astronomy. It's not just a pyramid, it's a calendar. It's got 365 steps, one for each day of the year, 52 panels representing the 52-year cycle of the Mayan calendar round, and 18 terraces for the 18 months of their religious year.
Wait, wow, they were that in tune with the cosmos. That's incredible.
Oh yeah, the Maya were incredible astronomers and mathematicians. The Temple of Kukulkan is a perfect example.
And then there's the shadow serpent illusion during the equinoxes. Have you ever seen it?
Not in person, but I've seen plenty of images and videos. It's really something. The way the sun hits the pyramid creates this illusion of a giant serpent going down the temple.
It's amazing how ancient people combine their knowledge of the stars with their architecture. They saw the world and the heavens as, like, connected. But Chichen Itza wasn't all about calendars and stars, right? What about the human sacrifices?
Right, it was part of their religion. And we found evidence of it at Chichen Itza, especially at the sacred cenote, this sinkhole. They used it for offerings, including human sacrifices.
It's hard to think about, but it reminds us that even the most advanced civilizations had a dark side. Their beliefs might seem strange, even horrific, to us now, but they were a part of their culture. We have to be sensitive to that.
I agree. We shouldn't judge the past by today's standards. We need to understand their culture.
So, lost civilizations. We've gone from the Atlantic to Troy to the Yucatan. These stories are still fascinating thousands of years later. But our journey isn't over. What's next?
We've got a lot to cover. You sent us some great information on some mysterious places that really make you think. Ready to dive in?
Lead the way. Let's see what other enigmas we can uncover. Mysterious places. And I think we have to start with Stonehenge, right? I mean, it's the big one. You sent some really interesting stuff on Stonehenge, those massive stones. I'm ready to dig into it all.
Stonehenge. Yeah, it's iconic, isn't it? A real symbol of mystery. It shows us how ingenious our ancestors were back in the Neolithic period, and their spiritual beliefs, too.
It's mind-blowing. Seriously.
Yeah.
These huge stones just standing there on Salisbury Plain. For centuries, people have wondered about them. How did they even get them there? And what were they for? A calendar, a temple, maybe a concert venue.
Well, we know Stonehenge wasn't built all at once. It was done in stages. Starting around 3000 BC, the first phase was a circular ditch and bank. And they had these 56 Aubrey holes. We still don't know what those were for exactly. Then later on, those big sarsen stones, some weighing like 50 tons, they were put up. That's the horseshoe and circle arrangement we see today.
That's incredible for people from the Neolithic period to move and erect those stones.
Yeah.
Some came from Wales, right?
That's what makes it so fascinating. They must have planned and coordinated everything so well, and the manpower they needed. It's hard to imagine. We think they might have used rollers, sledges, maybe even rafts on waterways.
But the bigger question is why? Why Stonehenge? We've got tons of theories, but no real answer. What are some of the most common ones?
Oh, there are so many. Some people think it was like an observatory, for the stars. Carefully aligned with the solstices and equinoxes so they could track the sun and moon. Others say it was more of a ceremonial place for rituals, gatherings, maybe even for connecting with their ancestors. And then you've got, the alien theories and ley lines.
Right, aliens and ley lines. Gotta have those. But what I found really interesting in what you sent was the Amesbury Archer, that burial site near Stonehenge, from around the same time. He had quite a story, didn't he?
Oh, the Amesbury Archer. Yeah, fascinating. He was buried with the oldest gold objects found in Britain. That means he was important, high status. And the craftsmanship, it's amazing. But get this, he wasn't even from Britain. We know that because of the analysis of his bones. He came from the Alps. Switzerland, maybe, or Austria?
No way. All the way from the Alps to Stonehenge. It shows you how connected Europe was even back then.
It does. Makes you rethink things. Why did he travel so far? Was Stonehenge like a religious center for him or something else? It's a mystery.
It's like these ancient sites were magnets, drawing people in. And speaking of magnets for mystery, there's Silbury Hill. It's right near Stonehenge too, isn't it?
It is. And it's massive. The biggest man-made prehistoric mound in Europe. It shows how dedicated its builders were. This huge cone-shaped mound, chalk and earth, over 130 feet high. And like Stonehenge, we don't really know why they built it.
Two giant structures right next to each other, Stonehenge and Silbury Hill. Do you think they're connected? Did they, I don't know, serve different purposes for the same people?
It's a good question. They're so close. There has to be some link. Some theories say that Silbury Hill, because it's so big and dominates the landscape, maybe it was like a symbolic opposite to Stonehenge, which is more about the stars, earthly and cosmic, maybe?
Wow, that's an interesting thought. It makes you wish we could go back in time and see these places when they were active, with people and rituals and everything. But as you said earlier, some excavations, especially at Silbury Hill, they cause some damage. It makes it harder to figure out what it was originally for.
Unfortunately, yes. They dug into it, basically. Like a cake someone keeps cutting slices out of. It's harder to put it back together, to understand how it worked. But English Heritage, they're doing a lot to stabilize both Stonehenge and Silbury Hill, so they're protected for the future. They're filling in the gaps and holes from those old excavations.
Good. Those places are so important. We need to keep them safe. Okay, let's stay in Europe for a bit, but jump over to Ireland. What about Newgrange? It's another ancient site, and it sounds pretty mysterious.
Newgrange. Now, this one is a marvel. It's a passage tomb built around 3200 BC, so older than Stonehenge and the Great Pyramid of Giza. You like things older than the pyramids, right?
Older than the pyramids. Now you got me interested. What's so special about it?
It's designed so that on the winter solstice, the shortest day of the year, a beam of sunlight goes right through a small opening above the entrance, and it lights up the whole passageway and inner chamber for about 17 minutes. It's been happening for over 5,000 years.
Wow. So they built this whole thing so the sun would do that on the winter solstice. That's genius, like a prehistoric planetarium.
Exactly. It shows how much they understood about the cycles of the stars. Professor Michael O'Callaghan, he's an expert on Newgrange. He thinks it represents the sun god and Mother Earth coming together, like a symbol of rebirth.
I love that. Ancient people saw the world as connected, the earth and the sky.
But Newgrange wasn't just for solstice celebrations, was it? It was also a tomb, right?
It was. We found human remains and artifacts there. Maybe they thought aligning the tomb with the winter solstice, it helped the souls pass on to the afterlife,
A place of death and rebirth, all tied to the sun. Pretty amazing. Okay, let's switch continents. What about Machu Picchu, the lost city of the Incas? High up in the Andes Mountains, what mysteries are hidden there?
Machu Picchu is, well, it's breathtaking. High on a mountain ridge, looking out over the Urubamba Valley, it shows you how skilled the Inca were as builders and engineers. It's definitely on my list of places to see. Just the photos are amazing. But what always confused me is, why was it abandoned before the Spanish conquistadors even got there? What happened?
That's a good question. We don't know for sure. It was built in the 15th century by the Inca Emperor Pachacuti, but about 100 years later, they just left. Some theories say it was a smallpox outbreak. Others think it was a strategic retreat, maybe because of fighting.
So it's like a snapshot of the Inca civilization, frozen in time. Right before the Europeans came. It makes you wonder, what was life like there?
Yeah, and their civilization was amazing. Their urban planning, their engineering, the stone structures, no mortar, no wheels. It's incredible how they did it.
I know. And it was hidden for centuries. Lost in the mountains, it makes it even more special. What do you think it was for? A royal estate? A religious place?
We're still figuring that out. Hiram Bingham, he's the guy who rediscovered it in 1911. He thought it was a lost city and a refuge for the virgins of the sun. But we've learned more since then. Now we think it was probably a ceremonial city and a royal estate, maybe a religious retreat for the Inca elite.
I can just imagine the ceremonies and rituals up in those mountains. Okay, let's keep going with our world tour of mystery. What else is there?
How about Jordan? Let's go to Petra. It's called the Rose Red City, carved right into the sandstone cliffs.
Petra, another place I need to see. Those facades, temples carved into the rock. It's unreal. Who made this city? How did they do it? It's in the middle of the desert.
The Nabateans built Petra. They were an ancient Arab people. They controlled the trade routes through the desert. They were incredible traders, architects, engineers. They knew how to survive in the desert.
I bet they did. Petra is like in the middle of nowhere. How did they even live there, let alone build a city like that?
Water. They were masters of water. They collected rainwater, built channels and cisterns. It was a whole complex system. They made the desert bloom, basically.
That's amazing. They turned nothing into something. But why did they disappear? Did the desert win in the end?
Not exactly. See, they controlled the trade routes, which made them rich, but it also brought them into conflict with the Romans. In 106 AD, the Romans took over Petra. And as the trade routes changed, Petra became less important.
Another civilization lost to time. It makes you think, even the greatest empires, the most powerful cities, nothing lasts forever.
You're right. It's a good reminder that things change. But luckily, Petra is still there. we can still see what the Nabateans created.
Okay, before we move on to those artifacts, I have to ask. I heard something about America's Stonehenge. What is that?
Ah, you mean Mystery Hill. It's in Salem, New Hampshire. It's a bunch of stone structures, and it's very controversial. Lots of theories about who built it and why.
Another Stonehenge, huh? Does it align with the stars too? What's the mystery?
Well, yeah, there are some astronomical alignments. But no one agrees on what they mean. Some say it was Native Americans, others say ancient Europeans, maybe even before Columbus.
So the same questions as always. Who built it and why?
Exactly. And to make things more complicated, Mystery Hill has been changed over time. People built on top of the old structures. So it's really hard to say what it looked like originally.
Ugh, frustrating. It's like someone keeps remodeling an old house. You can't tell what it was supposed to be. What do you think about all these theories?
It's hard to say. It all comes down to this debate about whether people came to America from Europe before Columbus and whether Native Americans built these kinds of structures. What are your thoughts? Does anything stand out to you from what you've read?
Good question. I'm leaning towards... Actually, you know what? Let's move on to those artifacts. Maybe they'll give us some clues about these mysterious builders.
Great idea. Let's see what we can learn.
Okay, those unexplained artifacts. I'm really curious about this Phaistos disc. It looks like something, I don't know, out of a movie. What is it exactly?
Yeah. It's a mystery, that's for sure. Found in a Minoan palace in Crete. A clay disc with all these weird symbols on it in a spiral, like some kind of ancient code.
I know. It's like a decoder ring or something. But what's it so special, besides the symbols?
Get this. It's the earliest example of printing we have. They use stamps to make those symbols, like a really old printing press, way before Gutenberg. Those Minoans, they were ahead of their time.
Movable type in Minoan times.
Yeah.
Wow. What do people think it means? Why can't anyone figure it out?
That's the problem. No one can crack the code. We don't even know the language. Some think it's religious, maybe a hymn or a prayer. Others say it's a calendar or astronomical observations, or maybe even some kind of law.
It's like having a message, but you can't read it. Maybe someday someone will figure it out. But for now, it's a reminder of how much we still don't know about the past. Okay, let's talk about the Shroud of Turin. I know that one's famous.
The Shroud of Turin, yeah, the cloth with the image of a man on it. Some people believe it was the burial shroud of Jesus. It's been debated for, I don't know, centuries, real or fake.
I remember they did carbon dating on it in the 80s, I think, and it said it was from medieval times. Did that settle it?
Well, the test said it was from between 1260 and 1390 AD. So yeah, medieval. But some people still think it's real. They say the samples were contaminated, maybe because the shroud was repaired over time.
It's like science versus faith. Sometimes they clash. Do you think we'll ever know for sure about the shroud?
It's tough. Its history is complicated. People handled it, repaired it, maybe contaminated it. We could do more tests with newer technology. But in the end, it probably comes down to what you believe.
Some mysteries might never be solved, I guess. Okay, how about those stone spheres of Costa Rica? They're just so weird. I've always been fascinated by them.
They're amazing, aren't they? Hundreds of perfectly round stones, some weigh like 16 tons. It's crazy. We don't know how they made them or what they were for.
I saw a documentary that said they were for, like, aligning with the stars. A giant stone calendar. What do you think?
That's one theory. They are very precise, those spheres. And they might line up with certain stars, but there are other ideas. Maybe they were status symbols, like the statues on Easter Island, or for navigation, or even just decoration.
Ancient bowling balls.
Yeah.
Can you imagine? But seriously, I'm glad they're trying to protect them. They're a piece of history.
Definitely. It's sad that some were stolen or moved, but now they're trying to put them back where they belong. They're part of our heritage, you know?
Right. Okay. What about the Baghdad battery? People say it proves ancient civilizations had electricity. That's wild.
The Baghdad battery. Yeah, it's strange. Clay pots, copper tubes, iron rods, found near Baghdad. From the Parthian or Sassanid period. Some people think it was a battery, like an ancient battery.
A battery? Really? Did they have electricity back then? What's the evidence?
Well, we don't have any writing or anything that says they knew about electricity. But when you put a replica of the Baghdad battery together and fill it with something acidic, like vinegar, it makes a small electric current.
So it's possible. But we don't know for sure. It makes you wonder what they'd use it for. Electroplating. Or something even weirder that we haven't thought of.
That's the thing. We have no context. Maybe it was for electroplating. Or religious rituals. Or medicine. Or maybe something we haven't even imagined.
Like finding a smartphone in a medieval castle. Okay, let's move on. What about those ancient airplanes? Were there really flying machines in ancient times?
Well, not exactly flying machines, but there are objects that look a bit like airplanes. Little models, mostly. Some people think they're proof that ancient people knew how to fly.
Like the sakura bird, right? That wooden bird from Egypt. Some people say it was a glider.
The sakura bird. Yeah, it does look like a bird with its wings out, and the shape is aerodynamic. But most experts say it's just a bird, a symbol, maybe, not a real glider.
So no ancient jets. Bummer. It's fun to imagine, though, what other airplanes are there?
The Kimbaya artifacts from Colombia. They're gold objects. Some say they look like planes. But again, most experts think they're just stylized birds or insects or fish, probably religious symbols.
It seems like there's always this debate, right? Some people see evidence of advanced technology and others see, just art or symbols. It's an interesting debate. Okay, last one. Tell me about the crystal skull of doom.
Oh, the crystal skull of doom. It's a real skull, carved out of clear quartz. People have been talking about it for years. The story goes that F.A. Mitchell Hedges found it in a Mayan ruin in Belize.
The story goes, what really happened?
Well, Mitchell Hedges actually bought it at an auction in London, so the Mayan ruin story isn't true.
So it's a fake. Bummer. But I remember reading about people saying it had, supernatural powers. Lights, healing, and that it was connected to other crystal skulls around the world.
Right. Even though it's not ancient, people say all sorts of things about it. Strange sounds, glowing, changing colors, and the legend of the 13 crystal skulls holding ancient knowledge.
A fake skull with a supernatural reputation. It's a great story, though. It shows that people love mysteries, and we want to believe in the extraordinary, even when it's probably not true.
I agree. Sometimes the story is more important than the truth. But speaking of stories, we've talked about places and artifacts, but what about people? Enigmatic people from history, whose lives are still a mystery. Shall we dive into those stories?
Let's start with a classic, King Arthur, the once and future king. Excalibur, the Holy Grail. It's a great story, but was he real?
King Arthur. That's the question, isn't it? And unfortunately, there's no proof that he was a real person. Like the Arthur in the stories. No historical records, no archaeological finds.
So he was made up. A fictional hero.
Maybe not entirely. There are a few real people who could have inspired the stories. Reathamus, for example. He was a British warlord who fought the Goths. Or maybe Arthur was a combination of different people, or a symbol of British resistance against the Saxons.
It's possible that the stories about Arthur, his knights, his adventures, maybe they came from real events, just changed and exaggerated over time. It shows how history and myth are connected. Okay, how about another legend? Robin Hood. Did he really steal from the rich and give to the poor?
Robin Hood, the outlaw who helps the poor. It's a story people love. But like Arthur, we don't know for sure if he was real.
So just a made-up story? Or were there real people who inspired it?
There are a few possibilities. There are records from the 1200s that mention an outlaw named Robin Hood. But we don't know much about him. Maybe Robin Hood represents all the people who fought against injustice in those times. A symbol of hope for the poor.
I like that idea. That Robin Hood represents the fight for justice and equality. Even fantastical stories can have real meaning,
Absolutely. They reflect the values and fears of the people who tell them.
Okay, let's get out of the realm of legends. What about Ötzi the Iceman? He was a real person, right? From way back in the Copper Age. What makes him so important?
Ötzi is like a time capsule. His body was frozen in the Alps, and it was perfectly preserved for over 5,000 years. He gives us so much information about life in the Copper Age.
It's like he's from another world. What have we learned from him?
So much. His clothes, his tools, even his tattoos tell us about their technology, their clothes, their hunting. He had a copper axe, flint knife, bow and arrows. Over 60 tattoos. It's incredible what we can learn from one person.
But didn't he die mysteriously?
He did. An arrowhead in his shoulder and a head injury. It looks like he was murdered. Maybe a sacrifice, maybe an ambush, maybe a fight.
A 5,000-year-old murder mystery. Do you think we'll ever know the truth?
It's hard to say. We can do a lot with forensic science, but we need more clues. But even without knowing why he died, Ötzi shows us that the past was full of real people with real lives.
Okay, last one. Tell me about the Hobbit. That sounds interesting.
Homo floresiensis. They were discovered in 2003 on the island of Flores in Indonesia. Imagine another species of human living alongside us until just 50,000 years ago. And they were small, like 3 feet tall, hence the nickname.
Hobbits, like from the books. Do they have hairy feet too?
Maybe not. But yeah, their size and the island setting, it does make you think of hobbits. Their discovery was a big deal. It changes how we think about human evolution. Where did they come from? How are they related to us?
So were they a different species or just humans with a growth problem?
That's what we're trying to figure out. Some think they evolved from Homo erectus and got smaller because of the island environment. Others say they were modern humans with a genetic condition. DNA analysis might help us solve it.
Another human species? That's amazing. Maybe there are more out there just waiting to be found. It's like a lost world.
It's exciting to think about, isn't it? And speaking of lost worlds, we have to talk about the Druids. The Celtic priests of ancient Britain and Gaul, they're shrouded in mystery.
The Druids, weren't they connected to Stonehenge? And all those rituals? Human sacrifices and wicker men.
People have always been fascinated by the Druids, performing rituals at Stonehenge. But most of what we know comes from the Romans. And they might have exaggerated things to make the Celts look bad. The Druids were important in Celtic society, that's for sure. But their beliefs and rituals are still a mystery.
So what's true and what's made up?
It's hard to say. We have bits of information from history, archaeology, and folklore, but it's hard to put it all together. We know the Druids were respected figures, priests, judges, teachers. They were experts in herbal medicine, astronomy, and fortune-telling.
They're like a puzzle with missing pieces. But that's what makes them so interesting, you know? They're a connection to a time before Christianity in Europe, a world we've lost.
Okay, one last enigmatic person. You mentioned Apollonius of Tyana. People compare him to Jesus. What's his story?
Apollonius of Tyana. He was a Greek philosopher and mystic. From the 1st century AD, he traveled a lot, taught, and supposedly performed miracles. He's a mix of history and legend. I remember he traveled all over the Roman Empire, and his teachings were about virtue, self-control, and being connected to the divine.
Right. He preached love and wisdom. His ideas were similar to other philosophies of the time, Pythagoreanism, Stoicism, even Eastern mysticism.
What about the miracles? Were they real?
Healings, prophecies, controlling the weather. Most of that comes from a biography written centuries after his death. It's hard to know what's true. Some early Christians saw him as a threat to Jesus. Others thought he was a holy man, even though he wasn't Christian.
It's interesting how he was around when Christianity was starting to spread. A time of big changes. People like Apollonius, they challenged the old ways.
Exactly. It shows that people were searching for something, and there were different ideas about spirituality and religion. The past is complicated.
This deep dive has been amazing, from lost civilizations to mysterious artifacts to fascinating people. My head is spinning.
It's been a great journey, hasn't it? Stories are powerful. Whether they're true or not, they help us understand the past. And new discoveries always change what we thought we knew. But the most important thing is to remember that history is about people with real lives.
And to our listener, thank you for all these amazing sources. I hope this deep dive has made you even more curious about the past.
And maybe you've already found your next mystery to explore. Until next time, keep searching, keep asking questions, and keep learning.